Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Drobo Broadcast Network. My name is Mario Blandini at Drobo, and today we're talking about data protection for everything that's in an SMB IT organization, to talk about how you can optimize your DR strategy and backup strategy using Backup Exec 2012 and its V-Ray technology. We have special guest Scott Baker, who is the product manager for Backup Exec at Symantec. How you doing today, Scott?
Doing good. So I am a Backup Exec product manager, so there are several of us. My areas especially have to do with virtualization and storage, which obviously has to do with deduplication, which is of significant interest to our friends with Drobo and our customers.
Great. I'm really happy to have you join today because there's a lot of Drobo customers that use Symantec Backup Exec historically, and there's a lot of great reasons they should upgrade to 2012. So we're looking to get your advice as well on some of the cool things that you can get now with the latest version. Hey, big businesses, they have all the greatest and latest innovations as far as data protections. And small businesses want to leverage a lot of the same thing, but one thing they can't do is take on a lot of the same complexity or cost associated with doing those sort of things. So we're talking about approaches and architectures for backup in an SMB environment with an integrated tool set. The idea is that if you have both physical and virtual servers, you can get it all done with one solution like Symantec Backup Exec 2012. I think everybody knows Symantec is one of the largest software companies in the world, and your experience dates back to the Veritas days when it was Veritas Backup Exec, and even before then. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your history as well.
Sure, absolutely. So I started with Veritas back in August of ~99, where I started with the Backup Exec support team, supporting Backup Exec 7.x was the shipping product at the time. Spent a number of years in support. From there, moved on into the systems engineer role. Spent several years as a systems engineer, mostly working with the mid-market. So it really fits in very well with the SMBs and who we're talking to today. And then for the last couple of years, I've been a Backup Exec product manager. So finally got an opportunity to do the job that I always wanted. Took the route of going through support and through sales, and now I have what I consider to be my dream job.
Fantastic, and I think that having a guest who has been a lot closer to the customer really helps us out. In terms of the right strategy, we'll jump right into it. We at Drobo feel that you have to start with reliable primary storage. So if you don't have RAID protection for your primary storage, certainly you're going to want to look at that, and going with a SAN-based solution helps you protect yourself from hard drive failures. But that's by no means the right way to protect data, because there's a lot of instances, whether it's file corruptions or human error or disasters, which mean you have to go to your data protection strategy to recover in those instances. In terms of the types of things that you think are different for a small business, Scott, reliability and recoverability are certainly key, but maybe you can talk about today's marketplace and how even the smallest of organizations has a mix of physical and virtual servers. That really complicates their backup strategy, especially if they were trying to do it the old-fashioned way.
Absolutely. When you talk about the mix of virtualization and physical, that's something that we hear about daily. So we do a lot of work directly with our partners and with our customers. And in talking with both of them, we find out that what our partners are doing is they're always moving forward, always looking at what is the next virtualization solution. And in talking with them, the typical deployment that they use is a virtual host with all of the machines virtualized as much as possible. If you look at industry statistics, they actually show that there's almost a 3-to-1 ratio of virtual machines deployed for every physical machine. So the move to virtualization is very strong. The drawbacks to that are obvious in that you'll see things such as data explosion, virtual machine sprawl, etc., things like that. So if you go to any of the typical virtualization websites, you'll see a lot of talk about what the drawbacks are to virtualization, what they have brought to IT. So that means that for your protection strategy, you have to take into account this virtual machine sprawl, this explosion in data growth that comes by virtue of having everything virtualized.
Well, one of the things I found interesting, Scott, was according to Symantec research, almost 2/3 of all virtual machines aren't protected. So maybe they're so easy to spawn up, people are spawning them up, but then they're certainly being used for something. Do you have any idea why is it that they're not being protected? Maybe it's just too complicated, or they're not following the same kind of deployment best practices and maybe change control that they would on their physical machines.
Right. So according to our statistics, a lot of the smaller customers, the SMBs, simply don't even think about disaster recovery. They think more in lines of business continuity. So that's one of the changing aspects of the protection solutions these days. You see more solutions going from, say, just being the traditional backup solution to being something that is a business continuity solution. That's something that we're pretty sensitive here at Symantec, and especially with Backup Exec. We're looking at what we're doing with Backup Exec. We're trying to move not just to be a backup solution. We don't want to just put our backup data on tape or disk. We don't want to just be doing restores. We want our customers to be able to respond to whatever disasters they have, whatever unique circumstances they have where their systems are not available, to be able to bring them back online as quickly as possible in whatever form factor that might be. Everything from some kind of instant recovery solution to the potential for a BDR device, a backup disaster recovery device.
Great. We'll talk a lot about various approaches and pros and cons to different ways of doing recovery here throughout the presentation. A lot of folks would probably be surprised that somebody like Drobo is talking about tape in one of their presentations. Hey, I got to admit, tape, while it's not the best medium for your on-site retention, and maybe even for a lot of off-site solutions. We'll talk about how deduplication makes off-site backup to disk storage a lot more feasible these days. But hey, there might be a reason that you want to go to tape. And I guess if you can help me from an architecture perspective, what is the current thinking among smaller organizations in terms of tape? If you're not doing VM backup, is it something where you consider going disk to disk and then tape becomes more of your long-term archiving or periodic off-site sort of solution? Talk about what the current thinking is, because certainly you can back up faster and you can have much more speedy recovery for a lot of different scenarios when you're using disk as the medium to which you're doing your backups.
Absolutely. So the use of tape really has become the archival or the off-site media of choice. But really the things that we can do today that make it interesting, make it easy to recover, make it easy to offer business continuity, all have to do with disk, right? I mean, disk is random access. It's online. It's always there. You don't have to have a solution that goes, a robotic library that's going to, take, a couple of minutes to reach out, grab a tape, pull it out of its slot, put it in its drive. The drive has to mount the tape, seek to the spot. So, there's a lot of benefits to using disk, in that immediate access to the data that you have in whatever format, to be able to access it as quickly as you possibly can. Tape just can't do that.
Well, it's a lot of reason why, from a basic architecture perspective, recommendations are that you have servers, your network's most certainly already likely in place. You want to have reliable storage that's a lower cost than your primary if you're going to do it for backup and for off-site storage. So certainly that's one of the things where tape had historically had an advantage, just the simple price per capacity. Now that you can have solutions like a Drobo, ultra easy to use and really affordable from a price capacity perspective, you can get that reliable storage that provides that on-site retention. This diagram we're showing you here is a simplified one, showing you on-site backup with deduplication and either at the application server itself or with a media server. We'll talk about those options here in a minute. But this same picture could apply if your network spanned to another site. Correct, Scott? You can have backups by your media server stored to offsite storage directly if you had two sites and your network could support the amount of bandwidth you'd need to carry out those backup activities.
Absolutely, and with today's deduplication technologies, the bandwidth doesn't necessarily become the limiting factor. Factors that become the most important that you have to deal with are latency, and we're looking at ways in which we can deal with the latency and drop packets to make it more dependable. But really, the bandwidth has become less of a factor with what we call opt-dupe. Now, opt-dupe is a term that we use. It stands for optimized duplication of deduplicated data. I know that's a mouthful, but essentially what it says is the source Backup Exec media server will take a look at the data that sits in that deduplication storage folder, communicate with the target Backup Exec media server, find out exactly what file segments, what file bits don't exist on the target, send only those non-existent bits over, and then send the appropriate catalog information. So this minimizes the amount of data that's transferred from one Backup Exec server to another Backup Exec server, making for a great solution for replication between two WAN-connected sites.
And I think that replication's what folks are really interested in. I think a lot of people associate replication with a faster recovery, where backup is perceived as having a longer recovery because you have to restore from that backup. We'll hit you with a couple of questions throughout today's presentation on some of those finer points, because with technology like the stuff built into Backup Exec 2012, that line's a little bit blurred because you do get it all in one product. How you use it really depends on the exact set of steps you'd use to recover. So let's talk about leveraging some of those capabilities. There is a cost to protecting an expanded data set. So a lot of folks are worried that over a couple years their storage could become more expensive to protect an expanding data set. They want to think about on-site and off-site because it's not good enough just to have your on-site backup these days. And as mentioned before, it's a heterogeneous world of physical and virtual machines. We're going to talk about some deduplication because there's an all-inclusive style backup with Backup Exec 2012 and a lot of really great new features that I want to hit you with here, Scott. But deduplication is built in. It's something that are there any limitations on how it gets added? I know that it's an optional license that you can add, but are there limitations to the way someone might purchase it? Should they always consider purchasing it up front, or is it something that they would maybe purchase later once they had a need to reduce their storage utilization?
Right. So you don't have to purchase it up front, but of course, whenever you're looking at your data protection strategy, it's always good to consider, what it is that you think you're going to be using. What solutions, what options do you need for that complete package? When I was in SE, we always talked about good, better, best. What's a good solution? What's the better solution? What's the best solution? Anytime you're talking about, the good, better, best, deduplication fits in there somewhere depending on what your needs are. Now, and we talked about this a little bit earlier before, not all data is necessarily deduplication friendly, so the customer does have to look at the type of data that they're going to be protecting and determine whether or not it's deduplication friendly. In some cases, the type of data that's not necessarily deduplication friendly is going to be multimedia type data, because that type of data is already in as compressed of a format as it can be, and to take apart multimedia type data can actually cause more time during your backup operation or your data protection operation than it actually is worth based on the minimal amount of storage savings. But absolutely always consider deduplication solution whenever you're scoping your purchase.
And from a Drobo perspective, we at Drobo allow you to mix and match the drives that you put into a Drobo product. You can choose to buy a Drobo chassis and expand it over time. We're big fans of you investing up front in technology like deduplication because it is an overall more efficient sort of solution. You can make better use of your disks, potentially buy fewer of them for your data protection, and give yourself more headroom to expand into the future. So it's one of those things that can easily be justified to offset the cost of hardware in doing that. And Scott, depending on how they want to deploy that, maybe you can give us at a high level when someone would choose client source dedupe versus server dedupe. A lot of it depends on the application running on the server, doesn't it?
It does. Now, with Backup Exec, we've got these things that we call stream handlers. Okay, so this is special code. It's a special API that's able to look at the nature of the data, determine what it is, and determine what the segment length will be to figure out what that optimal rate of deduplication will be. For example, exchange data. Okay, whenever you're running an exchange backup, the Backup Exec is capable of realizing, okay, this is exchange data. This is exchange, X version, and based on it being X version, I know that I need to set my segment length at 128K, to determine the most optimal, the most beneficial rate of deduplication. However, whenever it comes to backing up, say, VMware and Hyper-V, Backup Exec is able to look inside of those virtual hard drives. So for VMware, it would be a VMDK. For Hyper-V, it would be a VHD. But we can literally look inside those two virtual hard drive formats, locate where the files exist, their beginning, their end, and deduplicate the data inside of the virtual drives at the same rate that we would for any other type of data. Now, when you're going to want to determine whether or not a server is a good client or a good target deduplication solution or a member is whenever the amount of processing time that is available on that client is minimal. So any type of client-side deduplication is going to take additional processing. Okay, on average, you can figure that if the client is going to be doing some processing, it's going to be anywhere from 10 to 20% additional processing to be able to analyze the data, determine where those deduplication offsets should be, and then send the data over to the media server. So typically, a client-side deduplication operation is going to add 10 to 20% overhead onto your backup. The benefit is to that the backup should take less time because less data will be sent, and the backup operation should finish faster.
Mm-hmm. But you can still get the same benefits of space savings if you let the media server do the bulk of the heavy lifting. In this case, more traffic would go between your servers and the Backup Exec server, but to the actual storage, you'd receive a lot of the same benefit. In these cases, do you normally recommend media server dedupe for those servers that you really can't afford the extra 10% extra investment, or is it a case where maybe there's some specific applications where you'd want to prefer media server versus client?
Right. So it's not so much necessarily the type of data as much as it is the actual processing, the excess processing capabilities that are available. It really does typically lend itself to that. And you're absolutely right about the benefits for having the server-side deduplication, because the data will come to the Backup Exec media server. The Backup Exec media server will perform just like the client. It will analyze the data as it's receiving it. It will determine what data is unique and needs to be stored. It will determine what data is not unique and needs to be discarded. It will discard that those additional file segments that already exist, and it will simply retain the file metadata and have the information in the catalogs available for restore. So whenever the restore operation comes, it can quickly reassemble that file and send it back to the destination. So absolutely, server-side deduplication is always a viable option.
Great. Well, it's flexibility and choice, which is always a good. And for folks out there, Backup Exec 2012 also supports various appliance deduplication solutions. Those tend to be a little bit higher end. So for a lot of the smaller organizations, you don't need to have a dedicated dedupe appliance. You can leverage that technology using the processing power available in your servers themselves. And these days, folks are virtualizing because they have lots of CPU and memory. That tends not to be the scarcity factor. Sometimes storage is a scarcity factor, so deduplication is great in helping relieve some of that scarcity. In terms of looking at how offsite replication would work, this is a little bit of a build slide, so I'll go ahead and build it out here. At your main office, you manage it. You have the deduplication option that's there. When it comes to the remote offices, how is that managed? Maybe you can walk us through the workflow here of using it for offsite, because there's a lot of folks who have more than one site, and the key to getting up and running very fast would be to get your data to that offsite location and potentially even do a dissimilar restore, which we'll talk about here in a second, that helps you get your services back up and running very quickly. Maybe from a workflow perspective, talk about how it works, between 2 sites and maybe even 3 sites.
Sure, absolutely. So in what we have depicted here for your remote site, we depicted London and Paris. So if London is your primary site where you're running your backups, you're performing either client-side or server-side deduplication with Backup Exec, the data sitting in there in the deduplication storage folder. You're managing these 2 locations with our central administration server options so that you can adequately share the devices between them. And when I say the devices, I'm talking about the deduplication storage folders. In order to copy the data or replicate the data from the Backup Exec server in London to the Backup Exec server in Paris, you would have shared out that Backup Exec deduplication storage folder on London to the server in Paris. Then whenever the replication takes place, you will do what's called a set copy and copy whatever backup sets. And this really gives you granular control over what it is that you replicate. So you don't necessarily have to replicate all of your data. You can be very selective about what it is that you want to replicate. So that whenever that replication takes place, the source media server will communicate with the target media server, make sure that it sends only that unique information, again, reducing the amount of data that has to go across the WAN. Once the data is landed, it will also send over the catalog information that is part of that media set. So catalogs exist not just within the Backup Exec database, but they also exist within the media set, so that whenever Backup Exec on the target receives that media, it can then read the catalogs that belong to that media set and incorporate them into the into the restore selections that are available on that target. In this case, we're talking about Paris. At that point, that data is available for recovery really anywhere. It can go directly back to its original if you really got that pipe across the from Paris to London. If you want to push it across, you can certainly do that. You can do a redirected restore and restore to a system that is local to your, quote, Paris location. As far as full system recovery, as long as you have a full system backup, meaning you've got all of those components, your typical C drive, D drive, system state, shadow copy, whatever application data you have, you absolutely can use Backup Exec to perform a disaster recovery and do a dissimilar disaster recovery. That's one of the newer features in BE 2012. We've always had disaster recovery, and the prior version was called intelligent disaster recovery. Now we call it simplified disaster recovery. It's much simpler because now after the restore process is finished, during that process you can tell the wizard that this is a new system and perform a, quote, restore anywhere operation, so that once the recovery has completed, we'll go through Windows Mini Setup and reconcile all of the hardware differences between the original platform and the target platform.
Great, and having that deduplication license up front, as I suggested, would unlock this functionality for everything. So it's one of the things that you may want to plan on, especially if you have an offsite backup solution here, being able to more effectively get more of that data offsite. With a Drobo, we make it really easy to store lots of stuff, so you have freedom to keep many more of those full system backups to enable that type of recovery. Hey, let's talk about a new capability you have specific to converting from virtual or physical to virtual, because that's something that I think folks don't often think of their backup software to help them out with, but it can be very helpful as they plan out, building out their environment.
Absolutely, and converting physical systems to virtual systems is a huge task these days. I mean, it's one of those things where if you look at some of the statistics, again, I mentioned the ratio of virtual machines being deployed per physical machines, but recent statistics show that somewhere around 75 to 80% of the customers who are going to be deploying virtual solutions are going to be performing some kind of virtual conversions. So with Backup Exec 2012, we now have what we call P2V and B2V. So the P2V is a parallel process where we're running a backup, and then at the same exact time, we are converting that backup into a virtual machine on your target, and that target can be either VMware or Hyper-V. So that's a parallel process. Then with a B2V, what will happen is the backup will run first, immediately followed by the virtual conversion. And then we also have what we call point-in-time, not depicted here, but point-in-time allows you, if you run a backup, a full backup of that system, let's say, you come in, your full backup runs on Friday, you come in on Monday, and that system on Friday is, it's acting flaky on Monday. You decide, I better take some precaution. Let me go ahead and convert this backup into a virtual machine. You have that option to be able to do that, so you're not bound by simply a schedule-based conversion.
Great stuff, and I know there's some recovery options that are new to 2012 as well. You talked about the SDR there, and it's both for integrated bare metal recovery as well as bare metal recovery to dissimilar hardware. Talk about some of those things, because you don't have to buy additional licenses in order to get this. You just have to choose to use it this way. So talk about those two features.
Absolutely. So, This feature may sound familiar to some of our customers who have in the past purchased Backup Exec System Recovery or Symantec System Recovery, because what we literally did was we took the wizard that was in that solution for disaster recovery and we ported it into Backup Exec. Obviously, we had to make some slight changes to be able to have it work with Backup Exec backups as opposed to system recovery backups, but we took that same solution, we took that knowledge that we had, and we created a disaster recovery disk for Backup Exec that is capable of taking that full backup, restoring it to the original system, restoring it to dissimilar hardware, restoring it to a virtual machine if you so choose. If you haven't, gone through the process of doing a virtual conversion, or for some reason you can't, that you want to do a recovery, you can certainly recover it directly to a VMware or Hyper-V machine. This is a base feature of Backup Exec. You don't have to pay for it. Sometimes it concerns me that we don't talk about it enough because it is such a great solution for disaster recovery, business continuity, that it's just, free of charge. It's part of the core product.
Having an inclusive type of product that covers all these sort of scenarios really does help folks out. And what I was surprised to see in 2012, to be honest, Scott, is that a lot of folks who may have thought Symantec was a little bit difficult to work with, certainly a lot of features, a lot of things to configure, those have gotten a lot easier. I think a lot of work's been put on your side into making things a little bit more intuitive and reducing the amount of administrative steps. So, in 30 seconds or less, maybe you could recap some of the innovation that's happened there, because for folks who haven't upgraded to 2012 yet, they haven't seen how cool and easy it's gotten.
Right, absolutely. So, we've revamped the user interface, and one of the things that we tried to keep in mind was, ease of use. And part of that ease of use was that, prior versions of Backup Exec, we showed all of the options for all of the agents for all of the supported applications. What we've done now is that we know if you've installed a particular agent, application, or supported platform, and we will limit the number of items that we display to you based on what it is you have installed. So we've tried to reduce the clutter. Fantastic. And
one thing I can tell you is that Drobo products have been certified for Backup Exec 2012, like they were with 2010, and new to the Backup Exec HCL is the Drobo B1200i, or 12-bay SAN storage for business. The 800i, 1200i are both great backup targets, as well as some of the older products from Drobo. So you can get all the information on that directly from the HCL on the Symantec site. I'd point you to that for more information. In terms of putting it all together, folks, you have Backup Exec 2012, some of those great new things that were mentioned by Scott around what is built in. You have the server, you have agents where required, and some options there, deduplication being one of the favorite ones that I'd recommend there, and pairing that with some easy-to-use and affordable SAN storage that enables you to grow and do so at a cost-effective type of deployment, so you don't have to sacrifice data protection. You should be able to protect everything, virtual, physical, all those systems in your environment. And while the diagram here shows a more simplified solution on premises with backup storage on premises, this could very easily be replication to another site as well, leveraging deduplication over your WAN to enable those type of recoveries, whether it's dissimilar hardware, physical to virtual, all those sort of things that you can do here. We do recommend that you still do choose enterprise-grade 7200 RPM drives for your storage so you can get the best level of service as far as that goes. As we go to wrap it up here, I really appreciate your time today, Scott. A lot of folks ask me, hey, what can I expect from dedupe? Is it 5x? Is it 20x? Is it 100x? People, they want to know how much to expect. Do you have any general rules of thumb in terms of estimating the type of reduction you'd get for common SMB data? Think Exchange, SQL, file shares, that sort of stuff.
Right, absolutely. So we typically see a 9-to-1 ratio. So basically it's, for, let's say you got 5 terabytes, so let's say, it's going to reduce it down to, 9-to-1 based on that. So, I see that 5 to 20x reduction, typically 9-to-1 is what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's really significant. Heck, 2-to-1 is what people expect with tapes. So the fact that you're getting 9-to-1 is awesome.
Absolutely.
Great. You talked a little about some of the resources required to do deduplication, so thanks for go ahead and pointing that out. One of the things that we have a question on from the internet is, do you require a media server, or can you just have agents on all your systems that back up straight to the storage? Is media server a requirement, or is it something that's optional?
Right. No, it is required. So the agent itself does have the deduplication engine built into it, but in most situations, the data has to go directly to the Backup Exec media server, pass through it on its way to that storage. There are some scenarios in which that isn't necessary, but in most of them it is.
Now, you can make that Symantec Backup Exec media server a virtual machine, couldn't you? So you don't have to necessarily buy a new physical server. You could just leverage some of the resources you have on an existing Hyper-V or VMware host in order to do that.
Absolutely. We 100% support a virtualized Backup Exec media server.
We find, though, Scott, a lot of folks will take an older physical server. They get a lot more control. Certainly, when the backups are running, they don't have the CPU pegging out either, especially if they're doing media server deduplication. Having that dedicated server works well. And myself, having worked in data centers for years, we always got the hand-me-downs in terms of equipment to use for backup. Good news is most of the hand-me-downs that are just a couple years old are still great as a backup server. So great question there online. In terms of affecting the restore process, is there anything that people need to worry about if they're deduplicating, whether or not it's going to complicate the restore, or is this really seamlessly built into your interfaces so that all of that stuff in reverse is just done automatically?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you hit it on the head. The process is all handled for you. There's nothing special you need to do. Within Backup Exec, we display those restore selections in their entirety. Whenever the restore operation starts, Backup Exec simply pulls those segments out of the location within the database where they sit, and then we send them back to their destination. You can, for those of us who have been in IT for a while, you can think of it really like a glorified file allocation table, and the spindle just spinning and going and locating where those segments are to put back together.
Well, fantastic. We really appreciate your expertise today, Scott, in today's session. For folks who are out there in a smaller organization, you want to leverage all these new technologies and do elaborate and powerful type of recoveries without having to make it complicated or buy lots of different products, which is why Backup Exec is a great choice for SMBs there, particularly the 2012 edition. There's been many improvements made there, and Drobo is certified as well as being just a really great choice for use with your Backup Exec 2012 type solution. We want to thank everybody for their participation. And if you wanted additional information on how to use Drobo with Symantec Backup Exec, we have this solution fully kitted out on our website to include a how-to guide at the URL provided here. If you haven't yet tried Backup Exec, you can do so for 60 days for free by going to backupexec.com. Went there just this morning, Scott. Over on the right-hand side, you can go straight to doing your download and get access to that. So that's cool. Are there any other things that you'd point out in terms of resources? I know that the community is a cool place to go get information, but where could folks go if they want to learn a little bit more about Backup Exec?
Really, backupexec.com is the great place to go. That's where we have links to everything that you possibly find.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate everyone's participating today. And thanks again, Scott. I appreciate you getting on and giving us some time to talk a little bit about data protection for SMBs.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That concludes today's session of the Drobo Broadcast Network. Turn in next time as we talk more topics of interest for SMB IT. Mario Blandini signing out. Talk to you next time.